I think there's all types of interesting marketing initiatives that you can take to grow your business in a more organic way. Organic socials is one of them. We really try as a whole team to put ourselves out on socials, talk to our community, and customer service. Like customer service in this day and age is huge. I think the Chewy model was extremely interesting, where if your dog, passes the rainbow bridge, like we like to say, they're going to send you, a card and maybe a picture of your dog, or maybe flowers directly to your door. And it's those small, gestures that really allow you to show your customers that you care about them. They're not just a number.
Hi, I'm Mike Pinkus, co-founder Connect CPA and your host at GrowthTales. Today, we've got Kyle Feigenbaum, who is the co-founder and CEO of Healthybud, which is a pet wellness brand that's raising the bar in dog nutrition. They do everything from superfoods to treats to chews, all with the goal of helping your dog live longer and happier lives. Thank you so much, Kyle, for joining me today.
Pleasure, Mike. Great to be here with you.
I wanted to kick it off by saying I'm a big fan of your brand. I know we've been working together for a little while now, and my wife grew up with a dog, which lived to, I think, about 17. It was a Shih Tzu. But I hear all the time that dog nutrition and keeping your dog healthy, it's like a family member. And so I want to start off by asking a little bit about your background and how did you get into the business of just dog wellness and nutrition?
Yeah, it's not a simple path forward, like some entrepreneurial stories, but for myself, I've always been fascinated with building something out of nothing. And my first experience with that was in university. And so me and my buddy in college, we started a note sharing platform, and it was called Studywell. And at the time, we were running this on Wix. It was actually not Wix. It was WordPress with WooCommerce plugins. This is well before Shopify. So we were getting nerdy with it. And the idea was collect notes from various different courses, different colleges, and compile those notes in a very easy format and sell them back to the students so they can improve their study habits and prepare for exams better. And so we did that. It lasted about 2 years, and we tried to pass it on to the next generation. It didn't sort of click after graduating. But during that time, it was really working well. I mean, we were doing probably $10,000 to $20,000 in revenue a month, and this was on 80 to 90% profit margins. So, and we're young. I was probably 20 years old. So you can imagine, like, this was really exciting for us. And I think the most exciting part about it is that when we went and studied for our own exams, we'd go to the libraries, the public libraries, and we'd look at people's computers as we were walking down the aisles.
Yeah.
And we would see people on our own website. So that was amazing to see that we've built something from nothing that people were using. And that was really my first sort of go at entrepreneurship. That didn't last too long. It lasted until I graduated, and at which point I went into finance, which is a whole other story, and eventually rolled into pet. And the pet industry was very random for me. The one thing that I could say is that I've always loved my dogs. I've always grown up with a dog, which is not a reason why you should start a business. But, for me, it was an interest in the business. And I actually randomly attended a trade show in the pet industry in Orlando. It happens annually. And I was amazed to see how massive the industry actually is. And what I took away from it is that it's huge. There's so many different brands, but I feel like there was a void. Something was missing because I really didn't feel attached to any of the brands that I saw or met or felt like I wanted to purchase from them. And so I thought there was a real opportunity in that. And not long after coming home from the trade show, my family dog passed away very suddenly. She went from being, in my eyes, perfectly healthy in one day to wobbly on her feet, falling down the stairs, me picking her up because she was not able to stand, her sleeping through it, again, not able to stand the next morning, me calling my mom, us going to the vet together, the vet diagnosing her with hemangiosarcoma, a very aggressive form of cancer. and her basically going from, again, what I thought was healthy to not being able to breathe in a very short period of time. And what that pushed me to realize is that the pet food industry, even now, but especially at the time, was not set up for our dogs to thrive. And most dogs today are eating a highly processed kibble diet that is, stripped of all nutrients, and that is not allowing our dogs to get the nourishment that they need to live a long, healthy, and good life. And that's where, we came up with this idea to become the next generation pet wellness brand and to provide real, high quality, healthy foods to our dogs. And here we are today, 5 years later.
Wow. So you mentioned, I want to dive a little bit into, well, first of all, let me ask you about the products itself. So is the thesis that you have that similar to humans, if we eat healthy, as you get older, obviously the risk of everything that could go wrong just goes up exponentially. But I guess in humans, if you eat really cleanly and you exercise, you do all the right things, it might delay the onset. So when you had that situation with the cancer with your dog, were you thinking that if you helped on the nutrition front, there might be some inevitable things that could happen, but you might extend the lives of pets? Is that what you were thinking, or like what were you thinking?
I'll give you a personal story. So, I mean, that's twofold, right? Because the opposite is true too. As a human, we can eat McDonald's every day, twice a day for the rest of our life and probably be living. But then the question is, like, are we really feeling good on a day-to-day basis? And are we thriving, right? And so that's kind of how I think about a highly processed diet for our pets. They can live on it, but are they living a good life? For me, I actually, personal story, I suffer from Crohn's disease. And so I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was about 13 years old and was living with it for many, many years as I was studying, and then in a high stress environment, studying for my CFA, the hardest exam on Wall Street, going into finance, moving around the different banks, a different lifestyle than I'm, living today. But I got onto multiple different drugs. I went through the typical health programs that you would go through to try and put it into remission, and nothing really was working, and I hopped around to different drugs and whatnot. And what I realized at the end of the day, what really allowed me to put my Crohn's into remission, today it's in remission, is a complete change in my lifestyle and a complete change in my diet. And I did both. I quit my job in finance. I started to focus on different activities and, being out more in nature and doing more things personally from a lifestyle perspective, but also diet. And some of the things that I incorporated in my diet were marshmallow root, were slippery elm bark. Maybe it was probiotics. Maybe it was digestive enzymes. So all of these things were playing a real role in keeping myself healthy, and I felt the difference. And so the actual question when we started to look into can these same superfoods benefit our dog's health was the first study we actually did was, can these superfoods for gut health and digestive health benefit our dogs? And that's what we did. Actually, one of the first studies we did, even before launching our first product, was with McGill University. And we sponsored their food science and nutrition development program. And the whole goal was to determine, can prebiotics, postbiotics, digestive enzymes also benefit our dog's health? And they can. The answer was they can. And it was like an off the charts yes. And so that actually led to the development of our very first product, which was the Turkey Gut Booster, which is a treat for dogs, and we call it it's a treat with benefits.
Wow, that's an incredible story. I did not know that about you with Crohn's. One of my closest friends growing up had Crohn's as well, and I remember that wild swings with just like weight loss and all sorts of things. Yeah. And so
skin issues too. It sucks. These are all autoimmune diseases, and they're all connected. And one thing that I learned is that diet is a massive factor. And so I think opening my eyes to that from a very personal experience, it led me to believe that I bet you the same results can be seen in our dogs, and we're seeing that today. Like, we're getting all those messages from our community, from our customers, and that's really something it's amazing to see how we're impacting dogs' lives. And as a result, the lives of our human customers.
That's really incredible. And Kyle, you starting this business, it's interesting, and it's not that big a leap to go from being in finance to being an entrepreneur. I'd put them in the same category, but I would think it gives you a bit of a unique advantage in the sense that e-commerce, like just to jump right into Healthybud, e-commerce is a tricky business because you've got product costs. Like what people don't see behind the scenes, which I want to ask you about, is there's a lot that goes into packaging, logistics, production. What have you found? First of all, has your CFA added insight and value to you being able to figure out the unit economics of this business? And maybe walk us through a little bit about what does it take to get a product up and running and ready for sale? Because that's what people don't get to see.
Yeah. I think one of the best parts of being an entrepreneur is that you end up in this problem-solving playground, and it's exciting because you go through so much. Coming into this business, I knew nothing. Really, I knew nothing about starting a business. My first business, like I said, was in university, and it was just off a limb, and we didn't really know what we were doing, but figuring it out along the way. And that's kind of how Healthybud was too. I definitely brought a lot more experience to building a company, and people say I have good financial hygiene. I'd say that comes from doing the CFA and coming from finance. I think cash flow is one of the biggest hurdles that you face as an entrepreneur. Like that's what puts a lot of businesses under early, not being able to manage money in versus money out. So that certainly helps. But you brought up Shopify. Shopify was a whole new playground for me and something that I knew nothing about. People would use the word CAC, and I'd be like, "What's CAC?" Like, customer acquisition cost. What's customer acquisition cost? I have no idea. Yeah. So I'm learning. I've learned a lot, and I'm learning a lot as I go. And what's really cool about e-com is that the environment changes very, very quickly. And so the tools that are available to us now as entrepreneurs, ChatGPT just being one of many, it's unbelievable how quickly we can learn and pick up new tools today. And it's drastically different than where I started, when we started this business 4 years ago. We just didn't have the tools that we have today. So, did the CFA help? My mom would like to say yes. My mom was the one that was like, "What are you doing? You're leaving finance after a year and a half of just completing your CFA. How could you do that?" So I love her. She was just, being cautious, but always wanted to encourage me. It helps, certainly. I just think entrepreneurship, you're always learning. And so the biggest learning for me outside of operations and marketing and dealing with people, which is always challenging and rewarding at the same time. But the biggest learning for me, I think, is e-com, and still learning every single day how to improve everything from our offers to our angles to our audiences, how we're speaking to our customers, engaging the right customers online, customer service. I mean, the list goes on and on. And again, like the tools that we're starting to use today are extremely powerful, and knowing how to use the tools that are available to you as an e-com entrepreneur will put you in a much better position.
I want to dive into that a little bit. A lot of people are obviously familiar with Shopify, and that's amazing that, like, rewind many, many years, there was no way of creating such an amazing user experience for someone to just go buy a product, having that Shopify backend. But you could have the best product in the world, but people need to know about it. And so what are some of the tools that you have been using? And Kyle, you come from a finance background. How have you been dealing with the marketing side of, you now have this amazing product, you're doing something very differentiated because you're focused on the actual wellness and health of dogs. How are you getting the word out there? And have you learned a lot of marketing with whatever these tools are that you're using?
Yeah. So my co-founder is actually my wife. She comes from a background in architecture and music and singing, and which is also very not related to pet. And we're both figuring it out. And she always had an amazing ability to connect. If she was singing, she'd have an amazing ability to connect with the audience. In a social setting, she'd have a great ability to connect with whoever it is that she's talking to. And so she's really brought an angle that is understand your customer to the nth degree and listen to everything they're asking for and wanting, and using that to develop not only product, but also ads and how you speak to them, how they want to be spoken to. And so she's really the one that again has her ear to the ground and is able to help us craft different offers and angles, and using different, whether it's, creators, putting out our different creatives. And, if you're speaking to one of our audiences, which is, this is actually very detailed, but we found that one of our very key audience is empty nester parents, with a dog. And so when you think about it, it actually makes a lot of sense, because they might be in a home that's slightly too large. Their kids have already moved out. Their parents, they're a mom, they're a dad. They want to care for something, and once their kids are out of the home, they have the dog, and the dog becomes their everything. And they're also typically later on in life, they still might have a double income. They might have a single income, but regardless, their expenses with their kids being out of the house have drastically just gone down, and now they have more disposable income to spend on their dog. So that's actually a very detailed but key audience of ours. How we target them is still a work in progress. But the way that you speak to that particular individual, and the creative that we might be working with or partnering with to speak to them, is a very different creator than the other creator that is speaking to the 24 to 35-year-old female, which is another key target market of ours, and what that creator looks like and what that creator is saying, and the type of words even that they're using. Like it's very, very different. So finding the right creative, finding the right angle to speak to your right audience is extremely key. And you're only able to do that if you really understand your audience and who your customers are. And for us, by the way, we never knew that our customer was that empty nester, oftentimes even widower. Like, these are very detailed things that we only learned much later on in Healthybud's development. We always thought it was the 24 to 35-year-old female. Right. But we were not necessarily right. So we shifted how we're going after our audience. And then from that, once you understand your real customers, then you're able to go and figure out which platforms to use to target them. Is it Pinterest? Is it Facebook and Meta with Instagram, or is it Google Ads? And which platforms are you using to ensure that you're meeting your customer where they are?
Yeah, it's great advice, because I think defining that ICP, that ideal customer profile, is something that we all make assumptions, like you said, and we could be not dead wrong, but we could be off from what is actually happening, right?
Yeah, one of the best lessons that I learned actually was from a great entrepreneur who has had multiple businesses. The one in the pet industry, unfortunately, didn't work, and he ended up selling it off, not really taking it to the level that he could have or wanted to take it. And the one piece of advice because I asked him, I'm like, what's your biggest piece of advice that you give me after going through this? And he said, know your customer extremely well. And the best way to do it is by surveying them and surveying them now. And so asking them particular questions and understanding why especially the loyal customers, why are they coming back? And for the, customers that churn, why are they churning? Like, are they finding something else that's comparable? I think for us, the customers that kept coming back, they started using these words like, my dog was an extremely picky eater, and Healthybud was the only food that they ate. And so that's that aha moment where you recognize that, okay, customers are buying our products for reasons that we might not even be telling other new customers why they should be buying our product. And so from the picky eater comments that we got, we developed this picky eater guarantee, where you can buy any Healthybud product, and if your dog does not like it, within 30 days, you get a full credit and you can try something new.
Wow.
Yeah.
How has that worked out financially? Like, what are the numbers like? Were you nervous doing that, by the way?
We thought about it. I mean, we really were just curious to test it and see how this would work. What made us more comfortable is that we actually knew that our products are really amazing for picky eaters, because a lot of dogs are, like I said, they're eating very highly processed diets. And when you give them something that has real nutrition, dogs can smell it. Dogs are pack animals. And that's why the wolf and the alpha male when the wolf has its kill, the alpha male always gets the first choice of what part of the animal they want to eat, and it always goes for the organ meat because the organ meat is very high in nutrition. And so dogs know what is high in nutrition, and so that helps with palatability. And so with our food, because it's highly nutritious, it's actually quite palatable. So I was not too worried based on how customers were already saying, your food is the only food my dog will eat. So we wanted to see and test it. And surprisingly, we definitely do get some customers that say, my dog didn't like it. Can they try something else? And then
it's inevitably of a few.
Yeah, it's not that many. And ultimately, I think that's an opportunity for our customer service to get in touch with this customer. And that, like, just those conversations and the fact that we're showing that, we're what we're selling and what we're saying, it's real. It's not just marketing gimmicks, And once they have that customer service right on the onset, and then they do try something that their dogs love, and it was a picky eater dog, then they're hooked, right? Because, they finally found something. And it's a challenge as a pet parent, having your dog graze their food bowl or not want to eat. I mean, that sucks, and you get concerned. So it's really worked in our favor. And it's very, very rare that there's no products that we sell that some dog will like. So we always end up finding, for the most part, there's always those one-offs, Chihuahuas are actually very tough. We find those dogs like Chihuahuas to be the toughest. And some of our customers will come to us and say, I have a Chihuahua with no teeth. And we were like, let's try it, but it's difficult, So it depends. But for the most part, there's always something that a pet parent finds at Healthybud that their dog absolutely devours.
I think, like, first of all, that advice you got from I guess your mentor, it's actually interesting because I want to ask you the question. Like, Kyle, you said that you've now gone deep into really, really understanding who this customer is. You've also even given guarantees on picky eaters. Do you feel like a business will grow quicker by having that word of mouth effect of having people that are like in love with your brand, the products, they're Healthybud loyalists, and they're going to go tell 20 of their friends that are pet owners, versus, like, obviously there's like you mentioned, so many tools now to get marketing out there from an e-commerce perspective, and AdWords and PPC and all of that. What do you think is the balance, like, in order to grow?
It's such a good question. I think that the e-com space is so highly competitive today, and all of these companies, and the pet space, by the way, is an oligopoly. A lot of people don't know that, but the whole space is basically owned by Mars and Nestle, the chocolate bar companies and the candy companies.
Yeah.
They own all the pet companies, IAMS, Purina, whatnot. So that's a huge portion of the market. And the reality is, and, there's so many unbelievable brands out there. Open Farm, just to name one. I love that brand. I love the founders, and they're just great people, and they make great product. And I don't really see, as much as Open Farm can be considered a competitor, I don't really see them as a competitor, because at the end of the day, we're not really trying to steal market share from Open Farm. We're trying to steal market share from the long-standing brands that own 80% of the market,
right,
80% of the shelf space. So there's so much room for the newer brands that are actually marketing a very similar agenda, which is healthier food for your dogs, and alternatives to kibble for the most part. But I think it's so competitive online that you really have to have a very tailored message, and you really have to be crunching your numbers. And so the reason why I bring up the fact that the pet space is an oligopoly is because a lot of these longer standing brands, of course, they know their metrics, and we do too.
Right.
We know what our customer lifetime value is. We know what our first time average order value is. We know what our margins are. And that allows you to predict how much you're able to spend on how much it is that you're putting out to acquire a first time customer based on how much you get in return. For us, our payback period could be 60 days. It could be 90 days, depending on what is the offer that we're putting out. But these larger brands have the cash flow and have the money behind them to not depend on a 30-day payback or a 90-day payback.
Right.
They can be looking much further down the cycle, the customer journey. And they also have a much higher average order value because they're selling so many more products. We have 21 products, which I think is a lot. Handling that in terms of inventory is its own challenges, but they have thousands. So there's so many things they can upsell the consumer on, have them add to the cart. There's so many things that pet parents can find at these companies, which means that they are bidding more for a first-time customer acquisition. And for us, it's very hard to compete. And so that's where word of mouth really comes into play. I think there's all types of interesting marketing initiatives that you can take to grow your business in a more organic way. Organic socials is one of them. We really try as a whole team to put ourselves out on socials, talk to our community, and customer service. Like customer service in this day and age is huge. I think the Chewy model was extremely interesting, where if your dog, passes the rainbow bridge, like we like to say, they're going to send you, a card and maybe a picture of your dog, or maybe flowers to your door. And it's those small, gestures that really allow you to show your customers that you care about them. They're not just a number. And that customer service really creates loyal community and advocates for your brand, which goes extremely far. We see the results of it all the time, and it's very exponential.
Yeah, and I think you've brought up some really interesting points. I think every industry, by the way, Kyle, feels your pain on we're in a space where the big four, the PwCs, Deloitte's of the world, I think they do something like 80 billion in worldwide revenue a year. It's such a staggering scope and scale. And I think the advantage you have in a space is that you're nimble and you can be creative and do a bunch of things that that don't scale well. Meaning like the big players can't just have so much product research and talk to their customers or have the availability to get that deep, I'd say, in understanding these things.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, of these things that you listed, we've talked about now marketing, cash flow, because you have to do research and development, production, all these things. What would you say are the number 1, 2 biggest challenges you've faced scaling Healthybud?
Where do I start? I mean, we've faced so many challenges. I think, there's that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Without stress, you're not going to grow. And I think all of that is very true. With the amount of stress that we've had, I hope we've grown quite a bit. I think we have. But we've faced, external challenges like, rising exchange rates, a worldwide pandemic, trade wars more recently. There's so many things that pop up. And then internally, we faced our own set of challenges. I had a co-founder in the early days where that partnership broke up, and that got really ugly and was really painful for me. That's just one of the things that we've faced. And then internally, we've had cash flow issues as well. And cash flow is always hard to manage. There was a point actually in our business about 3 years in where we were so tight, and this was after a raise. So we raised $1.5 million in equity financing, and we raised about $500,000 in debt financing. And we were burning money at that point way faster than we ever were and ever did coming out of it. But the whole idea was grow the top line, and and that meant bringing on more employees in larger roles with higher salaries. It meant spending more money on marketing, and we got to this point where we were really stuck, and we were so tight that month, we were really unable to make payroll. And so I actually took a personal loan that month and paid payroll myself. And from then we recognized that, our backs could be against the wall in a number of ways as entrepreneurs, but that's a really bad position to be in. And I remember so clearly having a conversation with Dana, my co-founder and wife, and we were deciding, is now the time to throw in the towel, or do we double down here and bet on ourselves and continue to push forward? And so we decided on the latter. And now, my thing is I'm going to get to the top of the hill or I'm going to die trying. So we're pushing Healthybud as much as possible. But I think the biggest challenges that we face, I mean, there's a lot, but cash flow is scary. Putting yourselves in a situation where you're in a crunch, your back's against the wall, you have a payroll, you have expenses to make, your AR might not exceed your AP as much as you'd like it to, and things aren't looking brighter in the future. That was very scary for us. And that was the moment where we recognized that we're burning way too fast and we're trying to grow too fast, and we need to be more patient, and we need to focus on the channels that are winning for us. And we need to cut back. And we did. We went on a huge cost cutting initiative. And we said, within 6 months, we need to be profitable or break even or very close to, or else we're no longer going to be around.
I appreciate you sharing that, because that's a story that like literally everyone I speak to has been through. I mean, we've gone through our challenges. Like I think everyone goes through something like that. And you've probably seen this online from mentors as well, that the only two things that can kill a business are one, running out of money, or two, giving up. And and kudos to you guys for not giving up, because like it is, unless you've sat in the entrepreneurial shoes of growing and scaling, it's hard to know what that feels like, right? Of when you're under that pressure. So Kyle, I wanted to close by asking you, given that you've been through all this, if someone's starting out a business right now, or they're going through, or they're in the early stages, I mean, they haven't gone through financing rounds, ups and downs, cash flow issues, competition, all these things you've been through. Any advice you'd give to someone that is like earlier on in their journey?
I think, look, I mean, one of the best pieces of advice that I got was know your customer very well. So I think that's very important. Listen to your customers. But some of the things that I've learned: choose your partners very, very wisely. Partnerships can get really ugly. You need to be aligned, and you need to share the same motivations, and you need to have the same end goal in mind. And those discussions need to happen early. And if they don't, and they come up later, you're in for a lot of trouble. And we were, again, that was a very painful moment for me. That's now behind us, thankfully. But is something that I think I would pass along to any entrepreneur that I'm speaking with. And then the other thing that I would say is be very, very focused and intentional with everything that you take on. So as an entrepreneur, especially early on in a business, there's so many opportunities that can arise. And a lot of them seem really exciting to go after, but you got to stick to what makes you unique and stick to what is your core focus is. And I think patience is so extremely important in entrepreneurship, because businesses take a lot longer to grow than most people think. Like businesses take a long time, and you go through a lot of trouble at the onset. And if you're getting into business because you think you're going to buy back your time and your freedom and make money early on, then you need to second guess it, because I think those things could happen. And that's one of my goals now is buying back my time and gaining more freedom. But I'm 5 years in, and we're just getting started to do some of those things. So it takes time. It's a hell of a long journey. Surround yourself with good people and be patient, and you'll have a much better chance of succeeding. That would be my tips. That's
awesome. Well, I'm not going to ask you anymore. We might as well close with that, because that's amazing advice. But thank you, Kyle, for joining me today, and really appreciate you sharing all of this today.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.